It's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. We are talking Cleveland Indians. Mike Hattery is here.
Hello.
And on the other end of the line, somewhere in California, is TD. How's it going, sir?
Hello. What's going on?
Nothing. As we speak, there will be no live play-by-play because the Indians are rained out in New York. So, no.
And I know how much you love live play-by-play on the podcast.
Well, it really plays well to the people who listen 3 days later. So I guess we've got a lot of things to talk about. I haven't talked to you about the Indians in quite a bit, TD. But, I mean, as far as a follow-up season to a Game 7 of the World Series, I mean, you got to be pretty happy with the way the season's going so far.
Well, what's amazing is for all of the angst that the 2017 Indians seem to have caused a lot of Indians fans for, some odd reason, they have the exact same record that they had last year at this time. The exact same record. They're first in the AL in starting rotation ERA. They're first in bullpen ERA. All of a sudden you got a second half where the guys who didn't perform up to what everyone expected them to, like Carlos Santana, Frankie Lindor, Edwin Encarnacion, everybody other than Kipnis seems to have rounded into form. So I think it's going to be a nice September that we can relax, get our guys healthy, get our ducks in a row, and hopefully keep home field advantage at a minimum over the Red Sox.
Is that kind of your take on things, Hattery? Or, I mean, how do you feel about this season as a follow-up? Because just, I don't feel like I'm as informed an Indians fan as you and TD or follower as you and TD, but it seems to me that, like, this team is better and has underperformed a little bit, but it probably doesn't matter.
Yeah, they're just a better. I mean, it seems absurd to say that a team, coming off a Game 7 performance is better, but this team is just better in general. I think how it plays in the playoffs will depend on Andrew Miller's health, but I've been really happy with it, and I think the people who are impatient. I mean, it was frustrating for me too, but there were a lot of signs in the first half that it was gonna sort of revert to the normal. I mean, this team is really, really talented, and yeah, I'm content, and I think we have a wider window to rest players this September than we did last year. I think we're in better shape in terms of the division gap, which is even better.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, so speaking of the resting players, the Indians certainly need to rest a bunch of players because the injuries are piling up. I'm not sure that any team in the playoffs could have injuries pile up quite as badly as the Indians did last year. I'm probably jinxing us by saying that. But how are you taking the injuries? And if you're running the Indians, TD, what's your approach with the different injury cases as we head to kind of the tail end of the regular season?
It's interesting. If there's a man for this job, it's Terry Francona. It'll be very interesting for a couple of guys in particular. Number one, the guy who's needed the most time off or a day off really has been Jose Ramirez of late, just because, he was slumping, but you couldn't take him out of the lineup with all the injuries you had. And now all of a sudden in the last week, he's kind of rounded back into form. He hit the 2 home runs on Monday night against the Yankees, which was good. It'll be really interesting to see is how Jason Kipnis, when he comes back healthy, how things are going to work out with his playing time. Now, you want to get everybody healthy. Obviously, ease Kipnis back in, ease Brantley back in. But the nice thing about this depth that has been built by Chris Antonetti and by Mike Chernoff is that we've been banged up. The Indians have been banged up really badly, especially in this last 3-week period. You got neither of your corner starting outfielders in Chisenhall and Brantley, who are both injured. You don't have your starting second baseman. You don't have Salazar and Tomlin, who were in your rotation to start the season. And it's like they haven't skipped a beat. They have so much outfield depth, so I don't think you have to rush a guy like Brantley back until he's 100%. I wouldn't play him until maybe the last 10 days and let him get into shape over the last 10 days and then see how it goes. Lonnie, it looks like, will be coming back, and with the way the addition of Jay Bruce, you can ease Lonnie back in as well and kind of put him, in spots. You're going to want to use him in left field, though, until Brantley comes back so he gets used to it a little bit, because I don't think Jay Bruce is going to be moving over at all. I would give Frankie Lindor a day off here and there. I know I read in The Athletic yesterday or the day before that he says he never wants to come out and he doesn't want to take a day off. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but when we were up, I went to the game on Sunday, and I think, Mike, I think you were there too, when they went up 12-0 in like the fifth inning, he took out Frankie and he took out J-Ram and he brought in, they had a Gio, Yandy, and Eric Gonzalez infield at one point, which I never thought I'd see the day. So I think if anybody can manage it, it's Tito. But with all of the extra bodies you're going to have, activated Abe Almonte too, you're going to have plenty of guys in the outfield to give Lonnie and Brantley time to ease back. But the one and same with the infield. The one concern I have is what they're going to do with Kipnis and how that's going to end up, playing itself out.
So you mentioned the organizational depth, and that's certainly something that you've got to give Antonetti and Chernoff credit for. The one thing, and I think it came up on the last podcast that we did about the Indians with Hattery, and I bring it up again, frankly, because I'm a jerk. But if you look at the last 2 years with Andrew Miller and Jay Bruce now, and even the offseason with Edwin Encarnacion and that signing, how much of an indictment do you think that is of Mark Shapiro, TD?
I don't know. It makes him look bad with the fact that they ponied up when they were contending, like the Dolan said they would. And Antonetti and Chernoff have seemed to pull all the right strings, whereas Shapiro couldn't really get out of his own way. To me, I will remember him fondly for certain things. I mean, he was the one who renovated the stadium, and you guys have been there now since the renovations, obviously, many times. And I think we can all agree that the stadium needed renovating, and they did a terrific job in doing so. Going to a smaller park was 100% the right move, and that was all Shapiro. From a baseball building standpoint, he wasn't the greatest, and the drafts were miserable. I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that when they turned it over to Brad Grant, he's hit on first-round draft picks, whereas his predecessor, Doug Mirabelli, between CC Sabathia and nobody, I believe, he didn't hit on a single first-round pick. And when you're in our market, and I know I've said this many times on this podcast, when you're in the market we're in, you can't afford to miss on your first-round picks every single year for more than a decade. So from that standpoint, yes, that's an indictment on Shapiro. But Antonetti and Chernoff have more of a go-for-it attitude. Antonetti, his first trade was trading Ubaldo for, Drew Pomerantz and Alex White. Right or wrong, he showed he was willing to trade prospects when the time came, and added pieces when the time came. So I just think that, yes, while Antonetti learned from Shapiro, I think he also learned from his mistakes, which was a really big deal. So,
Hattery, how much do you think is just kind of luck? How much do you think is playing percentages? I mean, what's kind of your follow along take on that?
Yeah, I think Mark Shapiro is just an average general manager in a really small market. I mean, TD's absolutely right about the drafting, but I think, one thing that Mark Shapiro, there are a couple things he was really good at. The first is he just brought in incredible amounts of front office talent. We see about 5 different front offices being run by guys he's hired right now. He had a great skill for bringing in talent, and that's why we should be thankful. And he installed Antonetti and Chernoff in some ways, so that's really valuable. I feel bad for his mid-2000 teams. Honestly, I think he missed opportunities, but I think none of us saw Travis Hafner, Grady Sizemore just physically breaking at 28 years old. And I just think, I think he could have played that era better, but I don't think there was a solution to make that team contend when Grady Sizemore's body decided it was done. So I'm not a huge fan of Shapiro, but I think he was pretty competent. I'm fine with him.
You're such a big fan that you keep calling him Shapiro instead of Shapiro.
Yeah. Mike, the one thing just to add on what Mike said, he's right. The 2005 team, the White Sox won the World Series in 2005. Let's not forget they went 1-6 the last week of the season, and a 2-5 record would have gotten them into a 1-game playoff. A 3-4 week would have gotten them into the playoffs, and that was before there was 2 wild cards. There was just the one. That 2005 team was very dangerous. great rotation, best bullpen in the league. I really think that they could have done damage. And then 06, you had a bunch of injuries. 07, obviously, we remember what happened. They blew a 3-1 lead to Boston and could have gone to the World Series that year. And then 08 was shaping up to be great, and they kind of just, went south, and then that's when the rebuild began. And you got, Brantley for CC, and again,
and don't forget
Shapiro
Actiball.
got Brantley. Yeah. Actiball, that was my favorite time of all time, right? No, but he also Shapiro, again, while I agree with Mike, he was an average general manager. He did turn CC's half of a year left of CC Sabathia into Michael Brantley, and he turned a half a year left of your boy Casey Blake into Carlos Santana. So gotta take the good with the bad with him, I suppose.
See, and this is where history gets rewritten. It wasn't so much that he was my boy as I didn't like how much he was hated because the Indians never replaced him. It's like, anyway.
All right, he was still your boy. He's still your boy.
Yeah, I did make a custom T-shirt for Casey Blake once, so it's a true story. All right, so now, have you started looking ahead to the playoffs at all, or are you still kind of nervously just waiting to do that, TD?
Oh, I've definitely started looking ahead. I'm scoreboard watching for one team or two teams right now, Boston and Houston. Listen, it's awful with the Hurricane Harvey, and really, really sad. But I will say this from an Indians standpoint, the fact that and this is, people are going to listen to this and it's going to make me sound terrible.
I'm going to turn it into the headline.
But as an Indians fan, okay, don't tell me you didn't think about the fact that when you heard that Houston may have to play 19 consecutive road games, that you didn't think, oh, maybe we can catch them. I think they're 5 games behind Houston now, and Houston's played under 500 for 2.5 months. And Boston, just got swept by Toronto. The Indians jumped them. While we know that home field advantage in, baseball especially is probably extremely overrated, just because if you have the right pitching, it doesn't matter what happens. But, especially we saw that in the World Series last year, the Indians lost 3 or 4 games at home. But I would prefer, if we were going to play Boston, to start at home and have those first 2 games at home, obviously, in this short series. I don't think it means as much in a 7 game as it does in a 5, but I've definitely been scoreboard watching it. But and looking ahead to October and thinking about, let's line up our rotation and have those days off so we can have Kluber going in game 1 and, have Carrasco in game 2 and decide who you're going to go with Salazar or Bauer in game 3, depending on how Danny comes back. So, yeah, you got to. With a 7 game lead in the division going into September, sure.
Hattery, how much do you worry about the Red Sox this year? I mean, obviously the Indians have hit Chris Sale well, but I mean, it kind of feels like there's some sort of a collision course with Boston, and maybe it won't come to pass, but of all the teams in the East, they're the ones that I know the best, so I worry about them the most.
That's, I honestly think they're the best opponent at this point. Houston was really good earlier.
They're the best in terms of they have the biggest chance of beating the Indians.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
okay.
I think they're probably the most talented team the Indians could face. Houston's had a lot of issues with rotation health and with their bullpen recently. I think Boston's the most dangerous team.
What were you going to say,
I totally agree. I totally agree. If you look at on paper, the Houston's got that great lineup, but it's a lot of guys who are aging and are starting to slow down at the end of the season. And you can't tell me going into if we're in a 7 game series against Houston and they're pitching and it doesn't line up and it's game 1 Charlie Morton versus Kluber. I mean, come on, I think who's their number 4? I know they have Keuchel, McCullers, Charlie Morton are their top 3. Who would be their 4th starter? It's not registering in my head right now, but that is a team that does not scare me in the least bit. And the Indians beat them 5 of 6 when they were playing their best baseball. I went down to Houston actually, and I saw the sweep, and the Indians just played clean ball. It was terrific. I totally agree with Mike. Boston's the team that's the scariest. Their lineup's good. You still got Kluber and Sale, the 2 best pitchers in the league. Kimbrel's arguably the best closer in the league. I don't buy that bullpen in front. Addison Reed's a gas can, and the Indians have owned him for years. But I would much rather face Boston in a 7 game series than a 5 game series. and I'd much rather face Houston than anybody else that we're going to play. I'd rather face Houston than the Yankees, I think. I don't know, Mike. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I love Kluber for multiple starts, Severino for multiple starts scares me, especially, I think setting up the lineup against Severino could be pretty tough for Tito to do in terms of, if Chisenhall and Brantley are healthy, you have to bump one of Zimmer and Bruce, and you're picking a defense lineup or an offensive lineup, and I think that front end of the Yankees rotation plus that elite bullpen is they look really similar to the Indians team that made a run last year. Severino's an elite starter, and they have probably the best bullpen in baseball, to me, depth-wise. So they're scary.
So here's the real question that I have, kind of from a meta perspective. I mean, obviously, regular season records don't mean anything when it comes to the playoffs in the NBA. I'm not really sure because I'm a Cleveland fan when it comes to NFL and football. How much weight do you give a regular season record against a team or against a starter once the playoffs begin? I'll start with Hattery this time.
0 or 1%. I don't know. I mean, beating up Sale for his whole career is great, but playoff baseball is just really different, and I don't think I'm ready to bet on that translating against one of the two best pitchers in baseball.
Yeah. So I mean, if I believe in. His name is going to slip my mind. Who's the Boston pitcher who can't pitch in the playoffs?
Oh, David Price.
David Price.
Now that is
Yeah.
a playoff track record, and I believe in that. But I'm with you. Like a regular season drubbing of Chris Sale, even 3 out of 4 times or whatever, does not necessarily translate to me. TD?
I would say a little higher than 1%. I would say more like 10. I think when you're talking about somebody of Sale's caliber, yeah, I don't think it means anything. I don't think Chris Sale's ever pitched in a playoff game. Not that that's going to mean anything. I mean, the guy's a total stud, and I would take him on my team in a heartbeat. But, playoff baseball is definitely different. I mean, just ask David Price. He's the biggest example of that. That said, I don't think it means much. I do think, though, that a team can have a mental block against a certain team when it comes to October, but usually that's a team that you haven't beaten in October who is it that's completely owned the Nationals and has beaten the Nationals in the playoffs every year recently? I don't think the Nationals have won a series since they've had this good run. I think that's, the type of thing when you get behind, you're like, oh God, here we go again. But I don't think I like that the Indians are 5-1 against Houston, but I think if they played Houston in the playoffs, would it give the Indians a little bit extra confidence? Sure, but I don't think Houston is going, oh my God, I'm a little worried. We only beat this team once out of 6 times this year. So,
well, was it 07 when the Indians went into the first round series against the Yankees? I think we were 0-6 against the Yankees that year, and we took them 3 out of 4.
Yes, no, I think you're right. Yep.
That record stuff is tough. I definitely feel like this isn't sort of like a conference champion you haven't been able to get by for 4 years. Just different in the regular season. There's so much turnover.
Sorry, TD. I thought you were going to say something.
Oh no, I have nothing to add. Believe it or not.
So, are there any Cleveland Indians anomalies from this season that you're nervous can't continue? I mean, we saw some guys who played pretty well in the regular season last year just fall off the table in the playoffs, especially a certain young player who played center field. How much does that part of it concern you, or do you think the Indians have enough kind of veteran ability in their depth that you're not worried about those regular season things that we're counting on being anomalies?
Well, if this question is to me first, I would say that, well, first of all, last year, Tyler Naquin was falling off the table for 2 months, and so was Napoli, and they continued that in October. So I don't think it was they got to October and they didn't play well. I think they weren't playing well going into October. You know what the beauty of this Indians team and the beauty of the depth that Antonetti and Chernoff have built is that if somebody is struggling, they got somebody behind. They pretty much have someone behind everybody who you would consider dropping. So, for example, if Jay Bruce doesn't have it going and and Brantley has it going, then you can play Lonnie in right field. If Brantley's got nothing going, you can play Chisenhall in left field. If Kipnis just isn't doing it for you, and there's a game that you want to win, you got Kluber on the mound and you want to put that defensive lineup out there, you play Gio at third and J-Ram at second. So I'm not really concerned about that. The only guy that I would worry about come October getting into his head would be someone like Brian Shaw. But I think with Smitty out there and back, and if everybody's healthy, Shaw can slot in front of Smith and Andrew Miller and Cody, and it wouldn't be that much of a concern, especially when you consider how good the Indian starters usually are, and you wouldn't need to use all 4 guys in the same game, preferably. So, and Olsen for that matter.
Hattery?
I guess, I think the depth part that T-Day mentioned is really important. My concern would be, I think there are 2 guys that could be more exposed. I think Bradley Zimmer is a really good baseball player, and I don't think he has the same issues Naquin does. I mean, the Naquin defense we saw in the World Series is something we saw all year, so that wasn't shocking. I think Zimmer and Kipnis worry me in that they're both guys who really struggle against left-handed pitching. And I know Kipnis has had some years where he's okay, but that's something he really struggles with. And in the playoffs, when you're going to have constant matchup lefties on those 2 guys, I think you can really mute them both offensively. And when Kipnis is muted offensively, there's not a lot of value he's adding you. So then you have to go to Urshela. So I think that's valuable, but I think those are the 2 guys that I sort of worry about, especially since Kipnis is maybe 80% healthy when he comes back. I mean, multiple injuries this year.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to see how Tito handles Kipnis, because as we know, he's a team leader and he's a big rah-rah guy in the clubhouse this year especially, and seems to take a more of a leadership role. But on the field, God love him, he's been pretty awful this year. The more we've all watched Jose Ramirez play second, the more you realize just how poor of a defensive second baseman Kipnis is. There was a play that J-Ram made last night, moving to his left, diving play in the hole, off his wrong foot, throw to first that Kluber was covering. Kipnis wouldn't even have sniffed that ball. And that's going to be something. If Kipnis is not hitting, there's, like you said, there's not a lot of value there. I don't think Zimmer is going to see any sort of left-handed relievers, late in games, because Austin Jackson will pitch it for him. When everybody comes back, I got to believe the center, it's going to be a pretty straight platoon in October of Zimmer and Ajax, just because Zimmer's got to be on the roster for his defense and his speed, period. Even if you're not going to start him, he's going to pinch run for the catcher late in the game, or he's going to be in center field for defensive purposes late in the game with a lead. So I think you're going to see it. It's going to be interesting to figure out who's not going to make the roster. I think they're going to keep a lot more bats, just because the pitching, you don't need Zach McAllister and Dan Otero on the playoff roster, for example, which would allow you to keep, Guy or Bruce. I mean, look how many outfielders there are with everybody healthy. Brantley, Zimmer, Ajax, Geyer, Bruce. Who am I forgetting? I'm not counting Abe. Abe would be 6. So that's 5 outfielders, which would you keep 5 on a playoff roster? Sure. Am I forgetting somebody, or am I crazy here?
I think you forgot Chiz. I think there are 6 without
Chiz
Abe
enough.
now.
Yes. Okay, it's 6 without Abe. Okay. But I think you got to keep all 6, right? I mean, they're all valuable guys. You're going to play Geyer against somebody like Sale. You're going to play Austin Jackson in a platoon in center field. You got to have Bruce and Lonnie, and you got to have Brantley, right?
Yeah,
I don't
totally.
know how you can. I don't know who you're going to take off there.
Yeah, I mean, each of them, like Geyer, especially if you get the Red Sox, you have to have all of your right-handed platoon bats. So Jackson and Geyer have to stay, and Jackson just has to stay in general at this point. And then,
right,
and you can't. It's not like you're going to bump Zimmer, who's your best defensive outfielder, or Bruce or Brantley are like the coin flip, because they're probably, I guess, I don't know. It depends what people think of Michael Brantley offensively at this point. But I think it's impossible to bump any of those guys. And Tito's never going to pitch Dan Otero in a playoff game again.
Nope.
He's not going to pitch Zach McAllister in a playoff game again, probably, unless they're down 5. So there's no point in keeping those guys, especially when you have days off and you have multiple pitchers who go deep.
So that's another question. So, and this is kind of a procedural question because I don't remember. So they set their roster per series, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So it will be interesting to see how he starts off and how it changes from series to series, because I'm guessing that they will pull lots of different strange strings between series and within series, and that's kind of become one of the hallmarks of Terry Francona in his career, and specifically in the last few years with the Indians.
The most fun part of this is going to be if he decides to leverage Danny Salazar as an elite back-end arm for October and makes Bauer the 3-starter for the first series and just says, I'm going to have Salazar, Miller, Allen.
I love that. Go ahead, TD.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if he decides to, we don't know how Salazar is going to come back, too. It's also possible. It's a possibility that he will go with 4. I mean, we didn't even see him in the first round have to go to 4 starters. But if you were to go to just 3, doesn't that give you Kluber on short? Yeah, it's 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on. So Kluber would technically go on short rest. I don't know. I'm not sure if he would do it again and save him for Game 5, because I don't think that the Indians are sweeping Boston this year. I mean, who knows? But last year felt like a lot more. The Indians were a lot better of a team than Boston was. Than they are this year. They didn't have the pitching. I still can't believe Rick Porcello won the Cy Young last year, but look at him now. The real Rick Porcello has shown back up. But yeah, it's going to be real interesting to see how the playoff roster shakes out. Like you said, they don't need both Otero and ZMAC. They might not need either. And if these guys are going to go 7 innings per start, maybe you only need a 5-man pen, 6-man pen.
Yeah, I mean, with multiple, really, when you have days off like you have in the playoffs, you can go Miller and Allen 2 days on, and they get a day off, and then you can fire them out in Game 3 and Game 4, and then they get a day off, and you can fire them out in Game 5. I think the really cool thing about Salazar, where he looks a little messy, is you put him on the roster. I mean, depending on his health, we have no idea. I don't want to assume he's going to be healthy, but if he is, you put him on the roster, and he can pitch 3 to 5 innings in Game 4 if you have a lead and don't want to waste Kluber in that spot. Or if you're down in the series, you pitch Kluber there, and you turn Salazar into a back-end guy. So he can be used sort of determined by the situation in the series. I
love that. Will you tell that to Tito, please? Can we get that info to him? Because I love that idea.
I think he has me muted on every device possible.
I think that is an absolutely brilliant strategy. I mean, it's still amazing to me, and everyone talks about the Ryan Merritt game that we clinched last year, but let's not forget, in Game 3, Bauer was out in the first inning with the pinky bleeding, and we won 1-0 on a bullpen game. Incredible, right?
It's one of the most incredible games I've ever watched as a sports fan, and I'd like to think that I would say that even if it was not my team.
Yeah, that was about as satisfying as it gets, for sure.
Oh, it was awful. I mean, it was great, but it was awful for me to watch. Stress level-wise, that was unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it wasn't even that stressful, because by the time his finger started bleeding, I was like, all right, let the backup shortstop throw a couple innings. Just punt it. Just absolutely punt it.
Hey,
Tito punted nothing.
They could have used Michael Martinez. He was on the roster.
All right, so let's finish it off here.
Too soon.
Yeah. Let's finish it off here with some Sports Talk Radio 101 kind of stuff. We're not going to do a Mount Rushmore. We're not going to do but I want to know, what...
Kaiser Osweiler?
Yeah, exactly. No, this is an Indians podcast. What do the Indians have to do in order for this season not to be a failure? Is this World Series or bust? Is this win the World Series or bust? I mean, obviously with the Cavaliers the way they are, it's finals or bust at least. And even then, if they don't win now, people are disappointed in the Cavaliers. So coming off a loss in Game 7 that was pretty easy for TD to take, what's the hurdle look like this year? I'll start with TD.
I mean, it's World Series or bust. Absolutely. Anything less than showing up in the World Series is a failure, in my opinion. This team is built to win now. I still think no matter when healthy, this is the best team in the American League by far. They have the best rotation. They have the best bullpen. The lineup is, first or second best. You have great depth at every position. There is no reason. Everybody's a, been there already. There's no reason this team should not win the American League. Now, if they were to get to the World Series and play the Dodgers, who are, destroying the league, and they lost to the Dodgers, I'm not going to go, oh my God, it was a total failure. We lost to, you would lose to a historically great team. But I'm here to win championships at this point, and I believe their mindset is World Series championship or bust. I believe anything less than they meet the Dodgers in the World Series and lose, anything less than that is a disappointment.
Hattery, you give me an evil smile before you answer this question. Did you not like Sports Talk Radio 101?
No, I'm just a little too. I think I'm a little too laid back for Sports Talk Radio 101, unless I'm on Twitter. But I guess to me, the Indians have the most talent in the American League, and they should win the AL crown. And I'll be really disappointed if they don't, but there's also this thing to me where baseball is so freaking random. I mean, the Giants won 2 World Series in the last 9 years?
That'd be 3.
That'd be 3.
Years,
that'd be 3. And none of those years did it feel like they were the best team in baseball. They just won the World Series. And I think that's sort of reflective of the fact that the best team doesn't win the World Series that often. And it's just because it's really random. And I mean, I'll be disappointed as hell if they're not back. But I also, I think I've been really happy with how they've played this year. They're loaded, and give me 3 or 4 swings, last year, this year, next year. I think they're going to win a World Series, but I'm not going to be as broken as what I was last year, I don't think.
No, I'm with Hattery on this one. I'll give you the last word, TD, I promise. But I need to look outside myself a little bit and remember how miserable I was over the last 10, 12 years, and just I'm here for championships too. I don't really want participation trophies for the Indians, but like a certain standard, I kept saying make the playoffs multiple years in a row, like be in contention multiple years in a row. I think that obviously increases their odds of winning the whole damn thing. But the hurdle for me is continued trips to the playoffs to give yourself a chance. The most frustrating thing over the last 15 years has been the lack of lottery tickets they've been able to punch. So I don't want to just say that I'm satisfied if they get knocked out in the first round, because I'm not. But I punch that ticket. That's the hurdle for me. Go ahead, TD. I'll give you the last word.
I totally agree with you, and you have said that, and even during the lean years, you were saying that, and I totally agree. However, now that we're here, and like Mike said, the window basically of last year, this year, and next year, because after next year, Andrew Miller will not be on this team, Cody Allen will not be on this team, Brantley will most likely be gone. We don't know what's going to happen with Carlos after this year. This is your window, and it took us 19 years to get back to the World Series, okay? I don't forget how hard it has been, and how many years and hours and, that I've put in watching and reading and, with this team. So I agree with you, sustained excellence and sustained playoff runs. You figure you knock on that door X amount of times, one of those times you're going to kick it in. But this is it. This team is built to win. I really think it's this year is this year. Last year, this year, next year, got to happen in one of these years. And when you have sustained all the injuries and you've gotten through it and you still get to the playoffs, you got to believe that your team is the best, and that's the type of team that can win it all. So, again, anything less than a World Series, in my opinion, is going to be a major disappointment. But to Mike's point, what could possibly be worse than losing Game 7 of the World Series in front of me, watching it and all that happening in front of my face, having the greatest moment of my life happen in front of my face, and then it all come crashing down. So, thanks to a stupid rain delay. Let's stay positive. This year we're going to win it. Only looking forward, not looking backward. How about that?
Well, and you know what? If anybody's earned the right to be greedy, it's not me. It's not many Tribe fans that I know, but it is you. It is you. And this fan base deserves to have a couple people acting a little bit greedy and hoping and expecting the moonshot. The moonshot, which we thought we almost got last year.
I just want one. I mean, the Cavs, we talked about this. The Cavs don't mean anything to me. The Indians winning will change my life forever. I will cry uncontrollably. The emotions will just, I can't even imagine. My life is pretty great, all right? I got a good job. I got a great family. My kids are healthy and beautiful, and my wife's the coolest, and I got great friends. I'm missing one thing in my life, and that's that moment when the Indians win the World Series. That's the only thing I'm missing. And to think that it's 2 months away, possibly, I can't wait for October. Can we just fast forward through September and just get to the playoffs already? Let's do it.
I'm adding nothing to the end of this podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.